And if I go to sensitive history, well, then I must quote sources that say it rather than that I say it. This is a fascinating book, and the web pages are there. You can check it out. Facts are facts. This is a book that was written by a Jewish man. And he confronted the thinking of many of the high-placed individuals of the world. This is interesting stuff. In this book, Benjamin H. Friedman, a Jewish man, writes about the Jews and reveals an interesting history. He states that the present Jews in Palestine are not the true descendants of the Judeans, but rather descendants of the Khazars. In the letter addressed to D. David Goldstein of Boston, Massachusetts, a convert to Catholicism, the author, Benjamin Friedman of New York City, dated October 1954, provides some fascinating insights. This is in the public domain. Let's study this for a while and see where we get. Benjamin H. Friedman claims that the word Jew was only introduced into the English language in the 18th century, and that Jesus referred to himself as a Judean and not as a Jew. Inscribed upon the cross when Jesus was crucified were the Latin words Iesus Nazarenus Rex Iodeorum, which means Jesus of Nazareth, ruler of the Judeans. Now this is fascinating. I went and checked it, and it is so. Yes, it happens to be so. Now the word Jew today has a religious as well as a political connotation. You think of a Jewish entity, a government, but you also think of their religion incorporated at the same time, whereas the term Judean is a geographic connotation. It's a geographic. It doesn't incorporate the religion. It's where he came from. He was from Judah. He was a Judean. He further writes, the form of religious worship known as Pharisaism in Judea in the time of Jesus was a religious practice based exclusively upon the Talmud. The Talmud in the time of Jesus was the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all rolled into one, of those who practiced Pharisaism. The Talmud today occupies the same relative position with respect to those who profess Judaism. So the rituals and rites that many of them observed were based on the Talmud and not on the Torah. Rabbi Morris, this is all from the source, Rabbi Morris in Kurtzer wrote a most revealing and comprehensive article with the title, What is a Jew?, which was published as a feature article in Look magazine in June 17, 1952 issue. In that article, Rabbi Morris Kurtzer evaluated the significance of the Talmud to Judaism today. In that illuminating treatise and that important subject, by the most qualified authority at the time, Rabbi Morris N. Kurtzer stated, the Talmud consists of 63 books of legal, ethical, and historical writings of the ancient rabbis. It was edited 5 centuries after the birth of Jesus. It is a compendium of law and lore. It is the legal code which forms the basis of the Jewish religious law, and it is, note, the textbook used in the training of rabbis. So rabbis are trained according to the Talmud. And the Talmud has very little in common with the Bible. Then he states, from the birth of Jesus until this day, there have never been recorded more vicious and vile, libelous blasphemies of Jesus or Christians and the Christian faith by anyone, anywhere, or any time than you will find between the covers of the infamous 63 books, which are the legal code which forms the basis of the Jewish religious law as well as the textbook used in the training of rabbis. I don't want to go into it. If I were to put the quotes on the screen, which the Talmud contains about Jesus, you would be horrified. It is some of the vilest statements that I have ever had the dishonor of reading. And this is what their training consists of. He then proceeds to quote some of the most horrendous statements from the Talmud regarding ethical issues, and not only regarding ethical issues, which deal with many, many issues from economics to relations with women, etc., and, of course, the view on Christ. As to the origin of the present Jews in Palestine, he states that those Jews derived from Eastern Europe, and many, many of the Jews that today live in the reconstituted state of Israel come from Eastern Europe, are not descendants of the Judeans or the lost tribes of Israel, but rather descendants of the Khazars. Who were they? They were a nation most people do not even know of. He writes, the so-called self-styled Jews in Eastern Europe in modern history cannot legitimately point to a single ancient ancestor who ever set even a foot on the soil of Palestine in the era of Bible history. Research also revealed that the so-called or self-styled Jews in Eastern Europe were never Semites, are not Semites now, nor can they ever be regarded as Semites at any future time by any stretch of the imagination. What secret, mysterious power has been able for countless generations to keep the origin and the history of the Khazars and the Khazar kingdom out of the history textbooks? Did you ever learn about it at school? I never learned about it. And out of classroom courses in history throughout the world, the origin and the history of Khazars and the Khazar kingdom are certainly incontestable historical facts. You have to do some cross-checking. Even the Jewish Encyclopedia is quite explicit about it. This was the Khazar kingdom. Here is the Black Sea, the Byzantine Empire. Here was Persia. And here was the kingdom of the Khazars. It was a massive kingdom. Now let's look at some of this interesting history. The Khazars were an Asiatic nation. And the Jewish Encyclopedia states Persian origin that converted to Talmudic Judaism. Now obviously some of the rabbis involved there could have been Judeans and probably were Judean descendants, but their converts are not Judeans. And that had conquered a vast area of Eastern Europe, which was in turn later conquered by the Russians in the 10th and 13th century. So that is why there are so many Russian Jews. Have you ever thought where they came from? Did they escape from Palestine? Were they the lost 10 tribes? Did they emigrate to Russia? No. This is a totally different nation that accepted Talmudic Judaism. He writes, after a historic session with representatives of the three monotheistic religions, King Bulan, 7th century, decided against Christian and Islam, because Islam had just arisen, and selected as the future state religion the religious worship then known as Talmudism, and not known and practiced as Judaism, which was totally different, which was based on the Bible. They adopted the Hebrew alphabet, and the Khazars adapted words to their requirements from the German, the Slavonic, and the Baltic languages. This language was known as Yiddish, and Yiddish used the Hebrew alphabetic characters, but not Hebrew. It's not Hebrew. It's Yiddish.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world?
When Israel's Prime Minister visited Washington last week on the eve of the Purim holiday, he gave President Obama what he considered a symbolic gift, a copy of the Old Testament book of Esther. Netanyahu called it background reading on Iran, since its story concerns relations between Jews in the Persian Empire some 2,500 years ago. It's considered by scholars to be mostly fiction, but for Netanyahu, Esther represented justification for his stance against modern Iran.
Israel must reserve the right to defend itself. And after all, that's the very purpose of the Jewish state, to restore to the Jewish people control over our destiny.
But Netanyahu's controversial reading of history, even his fight to preserve the state of Israel, are questioned by many of Judaism's own religious authorities.
This is against the will of the Almighty, and this is not what it means to be a Jew.
On the threat from Iran and President Ahmadinejad,
he gives charity to the Jewish communities, and the words wipe out. He constantly says that Iran doesn't have a history, and he's not talking about harming anybody. He says that God will not allow this crime to happen. We concur with him that the Jews are in a danger because there is Zionism, and because it says in the Torah, if you rebel against God, it will not be successful, and it will bring catastrophic results. And Zionism has brought catastrophic results, and it could be much worse.
Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, Rabbi David Weiss explains why Zionism and Judaism are not necessarily the same thing. Rabbi, first of all, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be on your show.
Your most distinctive feature that I have noticed in seeing you in the media are the signs that you wear on your lapel. Please explain.
This is a sign that conveys the message of what it means to be a Jew. As it says, a Jew, not a Zionist, and pray for the speedy, peaceful dismantlement of the state of Israel. And then it's repeated, nkusa.org, our site, for people to go further and see it, their website, and then to see it's in Arabic, the same message. And basically it means that people, unfortunately, around the world see somebody as I am dressed, and they think that automatically I am dressed very religiously. I'm definitely a strong supporter of the state of Israel and of the occupation of the people of Palestine. And in truth, there could be nothing further from the truth.
In truth, what you want is the speedy, peaceful dismantlement of the state of Israel.
Because it's contradictory. Judaism is subservience to the Almighty, practiced for thousands of years, a covenant with God to be subservient to Him. And Zionism is a new movement, a relatively new movement, a transformation from the religion into a base, materialistic, nationalistic movement to have a piece of land which is forbidden for the Jewish people.
Okay, we'll have to unpick this piece by piece, I think, because for most people, the idea of the state of Israel is fixed within a very rigid framework, and what they understand about the existence of Israel is by and large very uniform, at least according to what you read in newspapers. So let me try and get your position clear on this. What you're saying is that the existence of Israel is somehow against your religion.
The Jewish religion forbids, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we were given an edict, a decree by God, it's a prophecy of King Solomon, that we are not to attempt to recreate our sovereignty. Even 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty, even in an uninhabited land, is expressly forbidden. And Jews wait for the day when God will make a miracle, where all humanity will serve Him in harmony. We won't have to convince an atheist that there is a God. Everybody will recognize God, and then we will all go up and serve Him. Prior to that event, we are expressly forbidden to try to attempt to make any Jewish nationalism sovereignty, and this was respected and upheld by Jews throughout the trials and tribulations of the Inquisition, the Crusades, and every time period of Judaism when they were easily capable of buying land. They never did it because they understood this is against the will of the Almighty, and this is not what it means to be a Jew.
Once again, this is not an opinion that you hear expressed very often. Are you in a minority? Is this simply your reading of the Torah?
No, this is the view of Judaism and Jews who are practicing the religion, who are around the world. You will find invariably any religious community that is very religious We carry around, first we have called the Rabbi Speak Out. This is the leaders of Judaism from Sephardic, Ashkenazic, in other words, European, Middle Eastern, any country. The rabbis, when Zionism came, the concept of Zionism was developed, the Jewish rabbinical authorities universally said, no, this is forbidden for us to do. The reason being that it is not the concept of subservience to God, it's a nationalism, and in its actions, when it comes into fruition, when they created the state, the concept of stealing from people, killing, stealing, is all forbidden according to the Torah. So in every facet, Zionism is a rebellion against the command of God.
But what about the argument that a lot of them make, and that is that the Bible specifically says that this land was given to the Jewish people by God, and therefore it belongs to them?
That is why Zionism decided, when they're making their national home, to make it in Palestine, because really the fathers of Zionism in the 1895, in the 1890s, when they made their first meetings, they discussed making their national home in Uganda, in Patagonia, and because they were anti-religious, Theodor Herzl, Ben Gurion, well, at that time Jabotinsky, Theodor Herzl, these people detested the religion, as we have a compilation of their writings. In his own diary, Theodor Herzl wrote that Jews should convert to Christianity. That would be the solution to the Jewish problem. And it should be done in pride and music. On page 14 of his diaries, we will get to that with God's help. And he didn't circumcise his son. He wrote about this in the newspapers, that he's not circumcising his one son's hands. So they detested religion. They were looking for a practical area of that they would flourish, a land that would be fruitful, and to create a land. But then they realized, practically speaking, you need a massive backing as far as money goes, and the way to get that from the world is to go to Palestine and claim that they're doing God's will, that the beginning of God's redemption, and therefore people should support them, because in the Torah it says that God gave the Jewish people the land.
But Zionism also claims exception because of the Holocaust. Now, you just attributed the phrase to Theodor Herzl, the solution to the Jewish problem,
yes.
And that will have raised ears all over the world, because
Right.
that's the phrase that most people attribute to Hitler. Now,
Right.
the idea that the Jews need a safe country in order to prevent the possibility of another Holocaust, in order to solve the persecution of Jews throughout millennia, is one of the founding principles of Israel. You don't think that holds any water either?
The Holocaust was God's will, and we don't question God. God is compassionate and so forth, but we have to be introspective, understand why it came. We believe that God will be exacting with the punishment for the Nazis, but at the same time, to take the issue of the Holocaust and to take that and to use it to rebel against God, when God specifically told us, do not attempt to make your own state, and to use that to take the land from the Palestinian people, is taking the people that died because they were Jewish, and to sort of dig them up and use them to rebel against God. It couldn't be anything worse for these people who died as Jews.
But you have to understand that the desire to be with a like community, the desire to commune with people of the same religion is a very strong one, and to have a homeland has got to be
emotional feeling.
But you're also saying that a defining feature of being a Jew is exile.
A defining feature is accepting that there is a ruler to the world who's compassionate, and it is medicine for the Jewish people, as Rabbi Samson Fulhurst, the head of the German community, wrote, that God is compassionate, and his will, since the destruction of the temple, was that he's good in his punishment. He wanted us to break our haughtiness, so he had us dispersed amongst the nations. At the same time, it was accomplishing a blessing for the world if we would be following the Judaism, because we are people who would be teaching the world of compassion, of serving God. So it serves twofold. It serves two purposes. But unfortunately, if we don't do what we're supposed to be doing as Jews, it doesn't accomplish that purpose.
I am not a learned scholar of matters Jewish, so I can't argue with you, but I know there are many who would. There is a strain within Israel itself, within the state of Israel, started, I think, by Rabbi Kook, perpetuated by a number of names in modern Judaism, who say, no, it's perfectly compatible with the writings of the Torah that we have a state of Israel, and in fact, it not only makes political sense, it makes religious sense too.
Yeah, well, that is why I said I'm not requiring anybody to become a scholar in Judaism, but if you just step out of the box, let us just say, and go to Jerusalem, go to New York, go to in London, Stamford Hills, the religious communities, the Ivy League of Judaism, the rabbinical colleges, you will see that the most religious communities, every one of them are they are anti-Zionist, and they, for instance, in Williamsburg, you won't find one Israeli flag. The majority of Jews in Jerusalem and Palestine won't send their children to the army, and they don't fly Israeli flags on their buildings because it is contradictory. It is diametrically opposite.
What about the
Zionist.
settler movement? I mean, they present themselves as being religiously based and very fundamental.
Yes, there is the issue that they fuse together Zionism. They've hijacked the name Israel, the Star of David. They're using this.
Say what?
And what they're doing is they've been able to, by incorporating the Jewish feelings, for instance, they call themselves the beginning of God's redemption. They do agree that we were sent into exile by God. The ones who aren't non-believers, which many of them are, but the ones who do believe, they say, yes, God sent us into exile, but we are the beginning of God's redemption. And they've been able to ensnare the youth, mostly from, these are all from, almost entirely from non-religious homes or marginally religious. They are not the mass, the general populace of Jewish religious people. These you will find in, call it the silent majority, all the communities that are opposed to these settlers. These settlers are definitely a minority that are always in your face. You will see them because they're up front. They're agitating, they're creating this terrible situation, but they don't represent Judaism. But being that they created in Palestine, their homeland, so now they're breaching every concept of thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, and it's being done, creating rivers of blood because of hate around the world.
Now, you used the phrase a moment ago, taking land from the Palestinians, which again is a problematic one for a lot of Western educated Jews and non-Jews alike. There is an argument, which is very much in the news right now, that there is no such thing as a Palestinian people, and there is an argument that says the lands that we are talking about never belonged to anybody called Palestinians. So what do you mean by taking Palestinian land?
You know, the Zionists would love to get into some technical jargon and technical. What are you saying? There's not a Palestinian people and the land. We're talking as individual dwellers in Deir Yassin, in town after town and town, that we have many of our Jewish colleagues who are presently still living in the occupied Palestine there in Jerusalem, and they remember how they lived in total harmony with their Muslim and Arab neighbors, and they live there. The majority of people reside. But
what do you say to Newt Gingrich, who says
Muslim.
these are all Arabs? They're not Palestinians, they're simply Arabs.
Again, these are technical terms to confuse the person. The fact is, the majority of people were non-Jews. They were Muslims and Arabs living in this area, whether it would be under Turkish or British mandate. That's neither here nor there. But they are the indigenous people who they either left because they were attacked as in Deir Yassin, or they ran away out of panic because they've seen what happened in these towns. And therefore, as a Jew, which is what people call human rights, we call godliness, we are forbidden to steal their land.
So let me just paraphrase, if I could, what you told us so far. The state of Israel has no legitimacy. It shouldn't exist at all. True. That Jews are responsible for rivers of blood, as you put it, in the Palestinian lands. That the Holocaust is not sufficient reason to override the basic Jewish premise that the Jews should not have a land of their own. I may not have quoted you entirely accurately, but even if someone like me were to even hint at thinking like that, I would be branded anti-Semitic.
Say what?
I would be vilified
Again,
in the mainstream media.
Yes.
So the question is, are you anti-Semitic?
That is the beautiful ploy of Zionism, that they can intimidate anybody who stands in opposition to their blatant, inhumane treatment of the Palestinians. And mind you, we will show you with God's help that they're brutally beating the Jewish inhabitants, who nobody can accuse us of being armed or militant. And yet, you can see that the Jews are brutally beaten simply because they're standing in Palestine, because there's masses, tens of thousands of Jews who stand out and demonstrate, and they get brutally beaten because they're opposing the existence of the state, and they want the world to know.
They get
this.
brutally beaten by the Israeli state.
By the Israeli, I mean, Ken, I could see it on our site and links, but you could just see, and simply they're standing there, non-militant, we never carry arms, and this is what happens.
But the argument that you have made
Yes.
will be interpreted by the majority of people reading English language newspapers, watching English language television, as being prima facie anti-Semitic. How does that make you feel that what you believe to be
Right.
a true representation of your religion is being portrayed in the media as actually being completely contrary to that?
Yeah, well, that's part of the tragedy that the media has been, unfortunately, we feel, sometimes owned and sometimes intimidated in a large manner by Zionism, in which they have media watch, just like they have AIPAC that affects politicians, are fearful of speaking against the Zionist actions or whatever they do because they're labeled anti-Semitic. Anybody can go and to come to New York. We invite anybody who wants to come to Manhattan. I don't give visas, but if anybody who comes to Manhattan, goes across the bridge, and they'll see the largest Jewish communities. And here, this is in Washington, D.C., when President Obama, when Netanyahu came to visit President Obama, you'll see tens of thousands of Jews go out, demonstrate against the existence of the state of Israel and their actions, what they're doing. And nobody reports. Washington Post, New York Times, has never reported. It's unbelievable. And when the Zionists make a little demonstration of 50 people, they're there. This is never seen.
Okay.
So
Sorry to keep interrupting. We're sort of running out of time a little bit. I want
that you're saying that we're anti-Semitic. All the charitable organizations, all the Jewish growth and that flourishes is from these communities. And we, so not only we're not anti-Semitic, we are concerned about all the Jews.
Are you
do for them.
Are you a self-hating Jew then?
Because we are concerned for the life and spiritual and physical of the Jewish people. We're saying they're causing bloodshed. Remove this impediment to peace, and we can live together, Muslims and Jews and Christians together in peace. We pray for the speedy and peaceful dismantlement of the state.
One of the other observations that I would make, everything that you have said, in many ways, reflects, quite funnily enough, the views of President Ahmadinejad of Iran, whom you have just visited.
Yeah.
And he, of course, is vilified as being the most anti-Semitic man in the world right now, with the sole aim of wiping out Jews and the state of Israel. Now, you've spoken to him very recently. Is that a fair characterization?
I'm not his lawyer. I'm not going to go into his heart, but the fact is, even Zionist papers admitted to the fact that he gives charity to the Jewish communities, and he says one thing: he has a problem with the oppression of the Palestinian people and the words "wipe out." He constantly says that Iran doesn't have a history, and he's not talking about harming anybody. He says that God will not allow this crime to happen. We
Finish him! Finish him!
concur with him that God, the Jews are in a danger because there is Zionism, and because it says in the Torah, if you rebel against God, it will not be successful, and it will bring catastrophic results. And Zionism has brought catastrophic results, and it could be much worse.
You speak with great passion. You have supporting materials. You seem to dedicate a great deal of your life to this particular cause. A lot of people will look at you and go, well, just one perhaps slightly extreme, perhaps slightly misguided individual. I mean, do you get much personal attack? Do you actually feel that anyone is listening out there, given what we see in the media every day?
Well, again, that is the point. We say Zionism, that they vilify, they ridicule. Other people they call anti-Semitic, us they call self-hating Jews and so forth. They ridicule us as being just some a nominal number. But we invite anybody to come and study for themselves the makeup of Jewish communities worldwide, and they will find that the Jewish communities that are practicing the religion properly around the world, without an exception, from Australia, which is Melbourne, the most, to Argentina, and I was in all these communities, thank God. No, I wasn't in Australia, I'm sorry, in Argentina. We just share this same view.
You clearly are very passionate about your beliefs, but you are also clearly fighting some fairly formidable forces in terms of the Zionist movement itself, the State of Israel, international Western opinion at all? Do you have much faith that your voice will be heard?
The great leader, Chief Rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Teitelbaum of blessed memory, he passed away some 30 years ago. People asked him, it's daunting, how do you stand against Zionism? So he said, I'm not in the minority, I'm with God. There's a God who rules the world, who's the most powerful, and therefore we stand strong. And anyway, at the end of the day, God will accomplish. God will do, and we believe we pray it will end. The state will end because it's a rebellion against God. We just pray it should happen speedily and peacefully. Don't be labeled anti-Semitic. If you stand up and urge the world that they should stand up for the people who are suffering in Palestine, in Gaza, and don't be intimidated, but clearly distinguish. Don't call it the Jewish state, and we could go on and live and serve God together in peace.
Rabbi, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege.
Hindsight, are you sorry for the hurt that your posts caused people?
I'll take my responsibility for posting that. Some things that were questionable in there, untrue. Like I said, and the first time you guys asked me when I was sitting on that stage, I don't believe everything that everybody posts. It's a documentary. So, taking my responsibility.
It seems like Adam Silver wanted to hear the word, I apologize, or in your mind, you said I didn't mean to cause any harm. Were you apologizing, or did you not apologize?
I didn't mean to cause any harm. I'm not the one that made the documentary.
What are the specific things in the documentary that you don't believe are true and that you don't believe represent your morals?
I think some of the criticism of the Jewish faith in the community, for sure. Some points made in there that were unfortunate.
Kyrie, are you surprised that you did hurt people?
Surprised that I did hurt people?
Are you surprised that reaction and some of the things that you did hurt people?
Yeah, I think I can ask a better question. It's just, where were you when I was a kid, figuring out that 300 million of my ancestors are buried in America? Where were you guys asking those same questions when I was a kid learning about the traumatic events of my familial history and what I'm proud to come from and why I'm proud to stand here and why when I repeat myself that I'm not going to stand down, it has nothing to do with dismissing any other race or group of people. I'm just proud of my heritage and what we've been through. And the fact that this has pinned me against the Jewish community. And I'm here answering questions of whether or not I'm sorry or not on something I didn't create. And it was something I shared. And I'm telling everybody I'm taking responsibility. Then that's where I sit. So, these same questions that you guys ask, me dealing with it as being a melanated, pigmented person all around the world and dealing with racial biases against my skin color, demeaning me because of my religious beliefs, and I'm still sitting in the seat standing. So I take my full responsibility. Again, I'll repeat it, for posting something on my Instagram or Twitter that may have had some unfortunate falsehoods in it. But I also am a human being that's 30 years old, and I've been growing up in a country that's told me that I wasn't worth anything, and I came from a slave class, and I come from a people that are meant to be treated the way we get treated every day. So I'm not here to compare anyone's atrocities or tragic events that their families have dealt with generations of time. I'm just here to continue to expose things that our world continues to put in darkness. I'm a light. I'm a beacon of light. That's what I'm here to do. You guys ask me questions about basketball, I give you my expert opinion. You guys ask me about other things, I give you my opinion, and it's met with whatever you believe the perception or the deception is. You guys investigate my life every day, and you justify it by serving your own purpose, which I honor. I would like the same respect in return, figuring out just like anyone else. So please keep that same energy when we're talking about anti-other things, because just because I post a documentary doesn't mean I'm anti-Semitic, and doesn't mean that I'm automatically standing with everyone that is believing in that. So it's unfortunate timing that we're in, but I'm glad that I could stand on the truth, because I'm not afraid of these mics, these cameras. I used to be, looking everyone in the eye and telling them the truth, that I'm proud of who I am. Any label that you put on me, I'm able to dismiss because I studied. I know the Oxford Dictionary, you look it up, right? Just one of the biggest mistakes I had in being a kid was not knowing European or Western language until I started looking it up and understanding the definitions and why they say, if you want to trick a black person, put it in the book. I was wondering my whole life why they said that. Now I'm 30 years old and I know reading is a superpower because it helps me understand where I'm going and where I come from. Like a tree with roots.
Kyrie, the documentary listed among falsehoods. It said the Holocaust didn't happen. Do you believe the Holocaust
those falsehoods
happened?
are unfortunate. And it's not that I don't believe in the Holocaust. I never said that. Never, ever have said it. It's not come out of my mouth. I never tweeted it. I never liked anything like it. So the Holocaust in itself is an event that means something to a large group of people that suffered something that could have been avoided. No one said we had to practice racism. No one said we had to treat each other like garbage. No one said that I had to stand here today and understand that many people that come from generations 60 years ago, 40 years ago, enslaved some of my ancestors still, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, and it's still going on. And you guys are asking me, respectfully, to speak on something that was a documentary that I had nothing to do with. I didn't make it. So just please keep that same energy when you guys are addressing me.
Kyrie, for the record, do you have any anti-Semitic beliefs?
Again, I'm gonna repeat. I don't know how the label becomes justified because you guys ask me the same questions over and over again. But this is not gonna turn into a spin around cycle of questions upon questions. I told you guys how I felt. I respect all walks of life and embrace all walks of life. That's where I sit.
I think what people want to hear, though, is just a yes or no on that question. Yes or no.
I cannot be anti-Semitic if I know where I come from.
What does that mean?
I cannot be anti-Semitic if I know where I come from.